Today's injury report on 97.3 ESPN, brought to you by Cape Regional Health System and Dr. Kevin McHale from Penn Orthopedics and Cape Regional Health System, the best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit us at caperegional.com/orthopedics. And Dr. Kevin McHale is back with us with another look at some big injuries this week. Doc, welcome back.
Yep, nice to be back on.
Nice to be back on, but unfortunately we have some injuries with the Eagles that we want to dive into. We'll get to Carson Wentz. He's going to play this week. We want to get some thoughts from you on that. But let's start with the major injury that happened last Sunday, fractured fibula from Mike Wallace. Now, originally, they didn't put him on the IR. They said that he might be a few weeks away. But knowing what you know, is it realistic to think that Mike Wallace could return this season?
So it's possible. It really just depends on how severe the injury that he has is. So when we talk about a fractured fibula, we're talking about a broken ankle, that bone on the outside of your lower leg. And when that fracture occurs in isolation, meaning like no ligament damage at all, just a broken fibula, it is possible to treat that with a surgery, plate and screws, get it fixed. You allow that time to heal and a splint and a cast. And then sometimes you can get players back as early as 8 weeks on the more optimistic side, if it's just that. The issue is if there's additional injury, if there's more ligament damage, like that syndesmotic ligament, that ligament that connects the tibia to the fibula, if that damage as well, typically it takes a much longer. And then you're talking about a few months to recover, and it's typically a season-ending injury. So I think it's a possibility, but, you know, it really just depends on how severe that break is.
That injury sounds like a really a devastating one. You hear fractured fibula. I mean, that's in the leg bone there. That's a tough one. So, realistic if time frame on those typical injuries, would you anticipate Wallace being able to come back this year, or is that something that's really, you know, as you mentioned, but is that something that's kind of a stretch to think that he could come back, especially a guy? I mean, this guy runs like a 4.3 40.
Yeah, you know, I think it is a stretch that he's going to come back. I think, you know, when we talk about fractures in and of themselves, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks for them to heal. But to get someone back up to running speed and get back to full, you know, playing condition, it may take another several weeks. So it's possible that he can get back, but I wouldn't really expect him, you know. And plus the other thing is with IR, you only can bring back 2 players, and a lot can change between now and 2 months from now as far as figuring out who the Eagles are going to bring back. So there's a lot of gamesmanship there too. But from a fractured fibula, it's unlikely to see him back this season, although it's possible.
All right, let's get your thoughts on Carson Wentz. We've been talking a lot about him, but now that he's back, cleared for contact, medically cleared, if you are working with Carson Wentz and you tell the coach, he is medically cleared, do you still have some concerns in the back of your mind, or are those, when you medically clear somebody, does that typically mean, nope, anything that happens from this point forward doesn't really have much to do with the previous injury?
No, so I definitely have concerns, and that goes with pretty much clearing anybody from any injury, particularly when you're talking about ACLs, and in Carson Wentz, the ACL plus with that LCL tear too. So we know that there's an increased risk of injury after getting back from an ACL tear. It's about 6 times the injury rate after you tear an ACL and get back to play within that first season. And that whole first season, you have an increased risk of injury compared to, you know, subsequent seasons when you compare a player to someone that didn't get injured. So there's a huge increased risk, and obviously you kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best, but there's only so much you can do as far as holding someone back. And once they check all those milestones, show they have full strength, and they've got their speed back underneath them, and they're playing well, then at some point you clear them and he's ready to go. It seems like right around that 9-month mark is when he was finally cleared for full contact, and he had a full week of, you know, the quote-unquote full contact practice and, you know, unlimited practice this week in preparation for this game. So it sounds like he really hit every milestone he could have, and it's as early as we could have hoped, really, for him, because he's right at that 9-month mark, a little over. So it's great to see that he's cleared and ready to get out there. But, you know, he may not be at his 100% self.
Do you think a lot of people have kind of speculated that 9-month mark was a big hurdle? And have you seen a situation where maybe he was medically ready before the 9-month, but that time frame is just, in your guys' mind, too early to let him get back? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes that is the case, and it's a little bit arbitrary because, like I said, there's an increased risk of injury throughout the whole first year. So why is it 9 months? It's just that in general, when we talk about coming back from an ACL injury, around the 9 to 12 month time point is when we expect to see players ready to play, and it's just that it takes some time for the biology, for that graft to get incorporated into the bone and to get solid, and for that strength to build up enough to get them back. So it probably was the case where he had met all his milestones, he was doing really well, and he said, well, at least a minimum of 9 months before we get him back on the field, and that's the case. Obviously, if there was some type of hurdle that he was, obstacle that he didn't quite get overcome, maybe a little bit weaker or something like that, they could definitely delay it. But it seems like, he was right on schedule.
If you look at Wentz moving forward, and you talk about the earlier you come back, the better the re-injury rate. But how many guys, when you say re-injury, how many guys really have a second ACL tear? Well, I know Bradford seems to be the one guy, but I don't recall hearing too often like, man, a guy tore the same ACL again. Like, it just seems that doesn't happen all that often, right?
Yeah, it doesn't happen all that often as far as NFL players getting back and re-tearing their graft. But the problem is sometimes they're at risk for other injuries too. Just for the fact that they're not at full strength, it can be kind of catering to that injured extremity. It just kind of puts them at risk a little bit more than if they were 100% full strength. We know that playing in the NFL is not exactly the safest sport to begin with, so all these guys are already at increased risk of injury, right? You're not just walking down the street. But at the same time, it's just that little bit increase of risk because they don't have that full strength yet, and they're 100% strength. Obviously, he's doing well with his recovery, but it's one of these things where it just puts you at a little bit at increased risk of injury.
ACL and the LCL. We don't hear a lot about the LCL. Like, that's not an injury that we hear too much about. And is that one, obviously the ACL we hear so much about, but is the LCL being a part of this? Obviously having them together is concerning, but what is that LCL, and is that something that you're concerned about with him coming back, or do those things heal quicker?
No, that is something you're concerned about. And the reason is you have there's 4 major ligaments in the knee. The MCL is the one we talk about a lot. Aaron Rodgers just tore his MCL. That's on the inside of your knee, so like the left side of your right knee. So that one's the one that's typically injured because when people get tackled from the side, they stretch that ligament, and that's the one they typically sprain. The LCL is a little bit less commonly injured, okay, because it's on the other side of your knee, you're outside of your knee. And when that gets, it's usually the same stress but coming from the opposite direction that can injure it. When someone tears their ACL and LCL, it is concerning because that LCL is a secondary stabilizer to the same idea of what the ACL does. So it provides some rotatory stability, that stability that you need when you cut and pivot to the knee. So both of these structures are incredibly important to stabilizing the knee for those types of cutting and pivoting maneuvers. So when you tear both of them as opposed to just one, obviously that's a bigger deal. So, it's been a lot of time since his initial injury, and both structures are healing well, but you definitely need a little bit of additional bracing and a little more time to get the full strength when you have that significant of an injury as opposed to an isolated ACL where you have that intact LCL and MCL and PCL providing extra stability to the knee, and it's just the ACL that needs to heal.
All right, Kevin, let me ask you about Lesean McCoy. Cracked rib cartilage. That doesn't sound like it's a lot of fun, but we've heard years past. I know broken ribs and rib stuff is very tricky for you guys.
Yeah, rib stuff's tricky because there's not much you can do. Unfortunately for the players, the good news is if you have an isolated rib fracture, the ribs that are intact next to them kind of act as an internal splint, right? So you don't hear often of a player going in and getting surgery for a rib fracture because it's already splinted by the intact ribs on either side. So they typically heal predictably in a few weeks. The problem for the players is it just hurts a whole lot, and it's really just based on the pain as far as when they get back out onto the field. A lot of times, as it heals, the pain gets less and less, and it gets easier for them to play. Sometimes these guys will even get numbed up before a game or at halftime to just kind of help with the pain control, and they always need this protective vest. Now, the tricky thing for Lesean McCoy, though, is he cracked his rib cartilage. So what is that? So the lower ribs have an extension of cartilage that attaches to the breastplate, your sternum, and that's what he likely injured when they said he cracked his cartilage. The cartilage is really thick, almost as thick as as strong as a bone, so it can crack and fracture similarly. The tricky thing about those is it can take a little bit longer than the bone to heal. It's not that bone-to-bone healing. so it may stay a little bit more painful for a slightly longer period of time. But the good news is he should be safe to play. It's just a matter of getting his pain controlled and having enough healing where he's going to feel comfortable enough to do his job as a running back.
All right, the injury report again, a look at some of the stuff. So Mike Wallace with the fractured fibula. We know Carson Wentz, which we'll be keeping an eye on probably. Do you anticipate soreness, rust from him on after not playing? I mean, obviously you're going to be sore typically anyway, but that knee area, like, is he going to experience some soreness that he might have a setback, or do you not anticipate that once you're cleared that he shouldn't have that soreness anymore?
No, I mean, he definitely will have some degree of soreness. I mean, it's not that 9 months a switch goes off and somebody goes from 70% to 100%. He will definitely have some soreness, and he might be a little slower than he usually is. I think Carson Wentz is an incredibly mobile quarterback. He probably will be more mobile this weekend than a lot of pocket passers in the NFL, but he might not have that same step that he usually did and that we saw him have last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a little bit slower, a little bit sore from that knee injury. We just saw Deshaun Watson come back week 1. He was pretty rusty after his ACL. I wouldn't, expect something different from Carson. I'd love to see him go out there and wow us on his first day back, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has a little bit of a slow start and then get back out there, at his usual self as the season progresses.
All right, today's injury report brought to you by Cape Regional Health System and Dr. Kevin McHale with Penn Orthopedics and Cape Regional Health System, the best of both worlds for a happier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit caperegional.com/orthopedics. Hopefully, injury-free. We see Carson Wentz on the TV screen in front of us. Hopefully he gets through and performs well. But we'll have another edition of the injury report next week here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, Doc.
Well, no problem. Hopefully get a bounce-back win this weekend.